That's so funny.
I know, that's what I said. He was like, I know him. And I was like, how?
I know her dad. I'm Newell.
I was thinking of you the other day and I wanted to email you something and I didn't know your full name or
No, it's
contact
okay. I'll write it down.
information.
I'll write it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, tell him I said hi.
I will.
Do I need to wait for you to finish or is it appropriate to meeting while I have a meeting?
Probably not. Well, when's the first break?
Might be a first, Mary.
I'm not sure how to handle it.
Thank you. Thank you for the
They
warning.
probably have cake up here from time to time when there's a special occasion. This could be a special occasion.
Special occasion?
Yeah, because I miss lunch and dinner. Hungry. I'm off start fading.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:32. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I get a roll call, please?
Good evening. Honorary Commissioner Binzik,
Here.
Commissioner Mattson,
Here.
Commissioner Hughes,
Present.
Commissioner Christian,
Here.
Vice Chair Artis,
Present.
and Chair McClinton Horner.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a presentation tonight from MCE.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you so much for having me back again. For those who weren't present last time, I will give just a very brief reminder about MCE. We are your local not-for-profit electricity provider, and what we do is buy the electricity generation. It goes through PG&E's transmission lines and is delivered to customers throughout Napa County and including American Canyon. And last time I gave just a few facts about some of the work we've done, but I was requested to return to drill down a little bit more about some of the things we've done in American Canyon. And so tonight I'd like to dive into some of the things that we have done and talk a lot more about the opportunities that we have to strengthen our relationship. As your community development manager, my role is to be that liaison, and you can always feel free to reach out to me. I'm in Napa usually once or twice a week. Happy to grab coffee. So, MCE and American Canyon. We serve a little under 6,000 customers. Then that means that it's households and businesses. So there may be more people in each household, but it's that many customers' accounts that we serve here in American Canyon. We do have a 10% rate of our deep green 100% renewable service being utilized in American Canyon. Those numbers are actually about to be updated. I don't have them quite yet, but we do expect that number to be higher now that it has been a little while, and happy to go over that as well. And through our partnership, when the City Council voted to become part of MCE, you receive the benefit of a lot cleaner electricity generation. So over 9,000 metric tons of CO2 has been reduced just through the electricity that you're using every day. Just whenever you flip on a light switch, it's coming from cleaner sources. So I wanted to highlight some of the programs that we've implemented here in American Canyon. So, it's not a huge city, and we haven't had as much engagement, and something that I'm really hoping we can work together on to expand this. But we've had 7 commercial energy efficiency projects completed, and the types of measures completed are lighting and refrigeration. And through our home energy savings program, that's a single-family direct install program where we actually just have canvassers knock on doors, and then a contractor comes and performs energy efficiency services for customers directly at no cost. We've had 73 projects completed to date, and the measures include HVAC, duct sealing, insulation, heat pump water heaters, and plumbing fixtures. And so the heat pump water heater, that is an electrification measure. That means we're going from a gas water heater to an electric heat pump. And that's really important because we need to decarbonize or electrify our buildings so that the power we're using in our homes is not a fossil fuel, but rather coming from a cleaner grid. So we're really excited about the projects that we've completed to date, and that includes $103,526 worth of incentives delivered to American Canyon residents and businesses. In addition, we've had electric vehicle chargers installed. So 4 ports means that there's been 4 actual chargers, typically 2 ports per charger. So that is a big opportunity for the city to take advantage of. If anyone's installing electric vehicle charging at a level 2 charger at their business or multifamily property, any commercial property, can take advantage of our $3,500, up to $3,500 per port rebate. So that's a big opportunity that we can work on together. We've also had 7 American Canyon residents take advantage of our electric vehicle rebate, and that's an instant rebate that anyone that's buying an electric vehicle can go to one of our partnering dealerships, and they get $3,500 knocked off the price of an electric vehicle right away, and that is stackable with the federal and state incentives that exist. And so we've seen $24,500 of incentives received to date. So that's the extent of the implemented projects that we've had. So I'd like to talk about how can we work together to realize a lot more utilization of our programs and find other ways to work together. So the biggest opportunity that I see is that you have an industrial area that has the types of businesses that could take advantage of our energy efficiency programs. So we offer energy efficiency programs that include things like rebates for changing out lighting, free energy efficiency consulting. We have a team of energy efficiency engineers that will come to site, audit your site, and see where there's savings to be found. And that is only available to large users of energy, right? So that industrial area could be a gold mine for finding businesses that could take advantage of these services. And so one thing we're doing in several cities actually is a co-branding marketing campaign where, using the auspices of the city seal, we are able to tell a wider audience about the services we offer in a way that will be listened to, right? It's got the city logo on it, they're less likely to think it's spam, and so we've found there's been great success when we are able to work with the city to get that message out directly. Currently, we're working with the city of St. Helena on this exact thing, and as well as the city of Benicia, and hoping for more cities as well. We've done co-branding city of Vallejo successfully, so it's something I would really like to work with you on to see if we can, once you're ready to move forward with a plan with us, identify how we could move forward on that if you like. In addition, we can also provide letters of support for your climate action plan. I realize now that says CAP plan, which is redundant, but anyways, yeah. So we're happy to be that partner and look over your plans, and you can, in your plans, you can make reference to our programs as a resource. So we're happy to provide letters of support that way. We're also really excited to be partnerships, to create partnerships for grants. We do this all the time. If a city is pursuing a grant, we can write letters of support. We can partner with you on a grant, especially if there's a grant to create renewable electricity generation within the city of American Canyon. We can actually buy that electricity. So if there were to be a large solar plus battery storage plant here in American Canyon, that's something we could pursue with you. So we have a multitude of ways to work together. These are some that I highlighted, and looking forward to, using our imagination, thinking outside the box. I'm at your disposal if you can think of ways that I haven't thought of yet. So that's my presentation. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions. So please let me know what you'd like, anything else you'd like clarification on.
Thank you. I'll start with questions from Commissioner Christian.
Thank you. At the beginning, I thought I heard you say that you buy energy and then resell it. So if that's the case, I'm wondering what's the mechanism that you reduce carbon emissions if you're buying? Do you buy a cleaner source, or how does that work? Or are you talking about other things that you do as that's where you gain your reductions?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And I apologize. I had a more lengthy explanation of all this at the last presentation. So what we do is we go out into the marketplace and we pursue only clean energy generation. So that could be solar, wind, hydroelectric, geothermal, biomass, biogas. So we try to find the amount of electricity to put on the grid that will offset the load for our customers, right? So we put that electricity onto the grid, and then you buy it through your bill. You'll see us on your PG&E bill. On the electric section, there's a section for generation and transmission. PG&E still handles the transmission side. We handle the generation side.
And so if you didn't buy it, what would happen to it? Would somebody else put it on the market, or would it just sit and wait until somebody bought it? Is there an
That's a complex question, and I'd be happy, maybe we could chat about that offline. I could bring some resources that can explain a little bit more about how the independent system operator works, right? So basically, the way electricity works is there's this grid. It's all of our transmission lines, our substations, et cetera. And the electrons that come to your home are not directed there by any particular mechanism. Electricity is put onto the total grid, and the California Independent System Operator basically pulls levers, makes sure that there's enough going to each split, each
Okay.
area.
So it's a large pool.
It's a big, large pool.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way. I mean, you can really think about it like a big pool that has pipes going out. Those are the people using electricity, and then pipes going in. That's pumping in. That's us putting in more electricity, right? So that has to balance out. And so we only buy our electricity from clean sources.
And do you know if anybody that produces electricity can just sell it to the grid, to just pump it in there and get paid for it? Or is there
So there are requirements, right? So there's a threshold of scale, right? So it needs to be a certain size. And at this point, for instance, we would need battery storage to be part of any solar project. But that, again, is a complex question. I'd be happy to get into it with you at some point and provide all that information I may not have on me right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Great question. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Commissioner Hughes?
So with the MCE, is it, I know you mentioned this in the past, I think I just need a little clarification. You opt in through PG&E, or do you just reach out to MCE? Would you reach out to you, would I reach out to you guys personally to opt in, or do you opt in through your PG&E?
That's a great question. So when the city of American Canyon voted to become part of our agency, which is called a CCA, or Community Choice Aggregator, that has a model where everyone in that jurisdiction is opted in automatically. And so it's an opt-out model. If you choose not to have MCE, you are always welcome to opt out. You can always opt back in and opt out whenever you like. So since you live in the city of American Canyon, you are most likely already a customer. We have something, I think something like a 90% rate of participation within the city of American Canyon. So maybe a little bit less than that, but it's around there. So most people have chosen to stay, but they're always free to go back to PG&E.
One more question I had about the ports. Is that, you said 4 ports?
That have been
installed?
funded by our rebates, yeah.
Is that like a commercial port or a residential?
So that would only be for commercial. The only residential that we do serve currently is for apartment buildings through that rebate program. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So any commercial property is eligible. You know, it can be City Hall. If you guys want to add more ports here or other city facilities, you are also eligible for up to $3,500 in per port of a rebate. So which typically covers about 35 to 40% of a project if you add it all up.
Gotcha. And what about residential? Is there any rebates for residential at this
We
time?
don't currently have like single family, right? But we do have the multifamily because we recognize that multifamily properties have more challenges, right?
Gotcha.
So, yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Mattson?
Yeah, quick question. I remember last time when you were here, you talked about how you've stopped enrollment in Deep Green for a few months. Is that true that at this point no one can opt in to it, or
So
was it just the automatically enrolling? You can still opt in if you want to?
that's correct. So we, due to kind of unbridled success of our policy of automatically enrolling new accounts, we have decided, or the board, I should say, our board of directors has decided that we are pausing on automatic enrollment for all new accounts. You can still opt up to our Deep Green service as a resident. If you're a commercial property, you may be placed on a wait list just because we want to make sure that we have the capacity of the renewable generation service to provide. And because, you know what I mean, we have strict rules that we have to be able to meet the demand through our generation capacity. But we will be, stay tuned on that. There may be some changes later this year or early next year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I had a question about the home energy savings audit.
Sure.
Is this something that is more like for older homes? We have a lot of homes that have been built in the last maybe like 20 years in the city. Is it still valuable for like a home that's like 10 to 20 years old to have the audit done? Or
Absolutely. I mean, within 20 years, you can have, you can have poorly installed insulation even if it's new, which I've seen with my own eyes. So we also go, we're going above and beyond code in many cases. So even just 10 years ago, code may not have been as strict. We're also providing a service like changing out a gas water heater to an electric water heater. That has nothing to do with the age of the home unless it's brand new, all electric construction, or it was electric construction already. This is an income qualified program. So, we are serving customers that are low to moderate income and may not be able to make these improvements on their home by themselves. So that's the idea of the program.
but the home energy audit is available for free for everyone?
So no, it's an income qualified
Oh,
program. And yeah, as we call it, our home energy savings. So they do an audit, and then if they find areas where it's feasible to make upgrades, they have a contractor come back and do the upgrades. It's a really powerful program.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
I also had another, you were talking about the businesses. Last time I thought the businesses were capped out. I think this was along the same lines that Commissioner
Yeah.
Mattson was saying. But we're still doing the campaign to bring more businesses in.
I'm sorry, I'm
The
not-
American Canyon Airport Industrial Area.
So that's for our energy efficiency programs. So not necessarily for Deep Green, right? So
Okay.
Deep Green, we're pausing on automatic enrollments. Where I think the city can have a powerful effect on reducing the greenhouse gases from its buildings and potentially from its transportation is by helping qualified businesses understand that our resources are available. And that having the city logo on it shows a level of trust that we can be that resource. And so that's why I think it would be a great idea to work together on it. And it's really hard. It's just honestly really hard. Businesses are busy. They don't maybe know who we are, and they don't really understand the programs. But by being able to deliver that message together, we can hopefully increase the interest in these programs and adoption, and really lower a lot of that, and save these businesses a lot of money, right? So it's not just saving, greenhouse gases. We're also saving businesses a lot of money. We know that utility costs are a huge issue for businesses. So any way we can help with that, we want to do it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Mattson?
Last meeting, we talked about that our Public Works Director is the contact to MCE. And I'm wondering, she's not here, so I can't ask her that question, but is the city already working with you guys to do co-branding for residential and businesses? Or is that something that's in the future?
That has not yet been approved, and we would, of course, welcome that. That is one idea that I like, but if there are others that the city would like to pursue, we're open to it. We do have a meeting scheduled in the next few weeks, so we could touch base. I will be touching base on that exact question.
Great, thanks. And the city manager report's a good way to get information out to the community, so hopefully that's something that will happen.
Yeah, and another thing we can also look at is if you have a city newsletter that goes out, that's another great way we can, pass along
That's what I
information
was
to residents.
mentioning,
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.
Commissioner Bensick, did I say that right?
Yes. Does MCE work with schools like how you guys work with commercial businesses?
Yes. So we definitely have the ability to work with schools. We tend to go through a more specialized route that way. But yeah, of course, we can work with any building that has electric and gas. They're going to have potential ways to save. And so if there are ways that schools can take advantage of these programs, sometimes it's not even our programs. We try and connect with all the available resources that are out there. So even if we may not be able to serve the school directly, there may be some other program that can serve the school.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other commissioner comments? Well, thank you for coming back and presenting to us again.
My pleasure. I look forward to coming back anytime. And please feel free to reach out to me. Alexandra has my email information, as does Erica. So don't hesitate to reach out anytime. And looking forward to working with all of you again real soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have an agenda change tonight.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to add to our agenda, recognizing that we have brought on our honorary youth commissioner, Allison Bensick. So I'd like to add that to agenda as item number 3, and then move item number 3 to item number 4
Okay,
for business items. Thank you.
sounds good. Thank you. Do I have a motion?
And I have a question. Would that be after the presentation, or after we talk about Newell? Are we pushing it back, or are we pushing it forward?
Forward.
We're going to talk about
First.
We're going to talk about honorary commissioner, youth commissioner Allison Bensick first, and then we'll talk about Newell.
I'll
It should
make
be
that-
pretty quick.
I'll make that
quick.
motion.
I second.
Roll call?
Honorary Commissioner Bensick,
Present.
Commissioner Mattson,
Yes,
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Christian,
Yes.
Vice Chair Artis,
Yes.
and Chair McClinton Horner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. We have the minutes from the September 6, 2023 meeting. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes?
I have one comment. I want to thank you for putting a description about what we talked about for Newell Open Space Management Plan. It helps so much, and I move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Roll call?
Honorary Commissioner Bensick,
Yes.
Commissioner Mattson,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Christian,
Abstain.
Vice Chair Artis,
Yes.
and Chair McClinton Horner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Introduction time. First item of business.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Allison Bensick. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to be here and sit with all of these great people up here. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I'm a senior at American Canyon High School, and I co-lead an organization called Napa Schools for Climate Action, which is what kind of got me into all of this. And I'm really excited for what the future holds, and thank you for letting me introduce myself.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair, yes. So Ms. Benzik was one of 6 applicants that we received as part of our youth commissioner recruitment for this year. We were looking at seniors at the American Canyon High School, and of those seniors, we chose one for each commission. OSATs, Parks and Community Services Commission, and then our Planning Commission. Last night, all 3 of our youth commissioners were took their oath of office with council, and so we officially welcome Allison Benzik to our commission. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you. Okay.
Chair, real quick before we move on, I think we skipped over public comment. If we could go back to that.
Oh, we did. Thank you.
No problem. We're so excited to have Allison here. So.
This is public comment for items not on the agenda.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Please go to the podium. If there's anybody in Zoom that'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Chair, it looks like we have no public comment.
Thank you. Next item of business, Newell Open Space Preserve Management Plan update, public access. We will discuss and memorialize the public access efforts that were achieved in 2015 to the present day in preparation of updating the Newell Open Space Preserve Management Plan.
Thank you, Chair. So we are here this evening to bring back the topic that we started on September 6th with this commission of discussing the Newell Open Space Preserve Management Plan that was adopted and approved in 2001. The commission agreed at the time that the management plan is a valuable and useful document in its current state. However, it does not address or solidify our maintenance and operational standards for agricultural open space property where we have open and active cattle grazing that is also open to the public for various types of passive recreational use. This is an area that the city staff, as well as the Napa County Land Trust and the commission agree that we need to add to the management plan. And within the staff report that was provided to you this evening, we have included the baseline, and that baseline is memorializing what was accomplished in 2015 and what we're doing present day. This is all the items throughout the years where the city and the land trust have worked together to solidify and acknowledge the public access for the Newell Open Space Preserve. In addition to that, with the staff report is the management plan that we've been discussing, as well as the conservation easement. The conservation easement really is the terms and conditions of what we can do up in Newell. We treat it as if the city is the property owner, so we manage the property, but the land trust has property rights that tells us what we can and cannot do on that property with its original intent to preserve that property and how that property came to the city, which is an open space preserve. So the conservation easement is a legal document that conveys real property interests of the land trust, and it restricts such uses and puts a binding on the land, including future owners, in which primary purpose is to keep the property natural, agricultural, scenic, historic, and open space conditions. The holder, or i.e. the city, the grantor, we have to acknowledge that easement. That easement is the terms and conditions of how we operate and manage that property. And we heavily rely on the land trust, and we have a great working relationship with the land trust. And so this evening, Lena Palastro, who is with the Napa County Land Trust, is here to help guide this conversation and discussion with the main goal is to talk and discuss about the public access efforts that were accomplished in 2015 and where we are today. So that's going to be attachment 2, and that's where the main focus is going to be this evening, and help guide future conversations with updating the management plan. Thank you.
I'll start with commissioner comments. Commissioner Christian.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm getting confused with the term grantor, because I understand originally the Newell family granted a deed of trust to the land trust. But further on in the deed of trust, it says reserved rights. This is page 5. It's section 4, reserved rights. It's pretty close in the front of the easement. But it says grantors reserve themselves and their personal representatives, heirs, successors, and assigns. That sounds to me like they're still talking about the Newell family. Okay, so the city becomes the grantor as soon as the Newell family is done with it, as soon as they transfer it to us. Okay, I got it then. Thank you.
Lena, would you like to come up to the podium? Thank you. You're more than welcome to sit next to me instead if you like. Whatever you are comfortable with.
All right, Commissioner Mattson?
Oops, sorry. I just had a quick question about this document, attachment 2. I think this is the first time we've seen it, and this is a draft of this document, correct, that we're commenting on the draft? Because a lot of things, we haven't provided input to this for this body. Am I right? There's a draft?
For the purposes of this meeting, it's solidifying all the efforts that have been made over the years of what we're doing up in Newell. So yes, it's in essence, it could be a draft. It's not finalized. It was in efforts of people throughout the years that have worked with the land trust to outline what we're currently doing right now and the type of recreation access or passive recreation that is approved up there with the land trust's approval. So it's a working document. I wouldn't consider it a finalized document because again, this can change. It really is trying to document what we have accomplished and where we are today. You're going to notice that it doesn't check all the boxes in the management plan. We don't do a lot of the things in the management plan. It doesn't mean that we can't do it. It's just we're not doing it. So this really is to document the public access efforts that we've made and what we're currently doing today.
Okay. So I don't know when it's appropriate to ask specific questions. So
I just wanted to add a comment to that. So at the last commission meeting, there was a question that said what had been approved so far that was either part of the management plan or separate in terms of public recreation. And this list actually covers the points to date about public recreation. So since the park was opened in 2015, those that have come to the land trust for review or approval and that we've granted in terms of these are good, go ahead, they match with what the conservation easement and the management plan have set out.
okay. Because I noticed that one is the park hours are Saturday to Sunday on this document, and that doesn't sound right to me. That I thought it was daily.
Sunday to Saturday.
Yeah, it's just a typo in this document, I think. So. Yes. Okay, that's easy.
Totally a typo.
That's an easy one.
Yes. It is 7 days a week. Thank you.
The three that are listed here that I'm confused about is number 3, no camping overnight stays. And the next one is that dogs are required to be always on a leash. But I thought that the grazing lease, verbally at least, had told us we couldn't have dogs in Newell. So I'm confused that if the conservation easement says we can have dogs in Newell, that's totally different than what I've known for the last 14 years. So I wanted to ask about that. And then I'm confused about the addition of e-bikes to the no motorized vehicles. I'd like to know more about that. And then I was trying to map this, and I understand what you're saying about the management plan, but we've always been told the management plan rules. There's a few things that were in the management plan that I think must not have made it into the conservation easement or are approved, that are on our sign, our rule sign, that trails may be closed at any time. And in the management plan, no social trails, which I think is definitely I would think a land trust issue. So I just wanted to actually specifically ask about the camping, dogs, and e-bikes.
So I'll take those, Lena, if you don't mind, to start off, because this is really more of a city operational decision. Like I mentioned, there's going to be things that are considered allowed under the conservation easement, which mirrors our management plan, that the city is just not set up to support, i.e. camping. We don't have the infrastructure or the staff support to monitor or oversee a overnight camping program up at Newell. As you can see from this document, the staff oversight is minimal at best in most cases, and adding an overnight camping program would actually require staff oversight more than what we are able to do at this time. So that's the decision of why these general rules say no camping, even though the conservation easement would allow it. Dogs in the parks. We actually have a grazing license that was recently approved and signed by the Azevedo family, and that's specific to the grazing up in Newell. I understand there may have been conversations about no dogs up there, but right now there's dogs up there. Dogs go up there all the time. I see them up there. And again, it's that enforcement issue, is how do we enforce something where we don't have a ranger program or the staff oversight is minimal. So we see people all the time at wetlands and we ask them, their dogs and animals, to be on leash, but sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. So dogs at this point, they are up there. We're asking them to be on a leash of no more than 6 feet. And then e-bikes, under the umbrella of no motorized vehicles or recreational equipment, that's where we would consider an e-bike to be. And at this time, we have not discussed that as being an option up in Newell. That is not something that we've brought up to the land trust, and that would be something that would be a consideration that we would need to discuss with them and have approval to do that and allow that type of activity.
Thank you. So regarding camping, I don't know, can I ask Commissioner Christian whether the scouts ever camped up there? Because that was, I think, what the intent originally was. And perhaps it's never been used, the picnic site / campground has never been used as a campground.
It seems to me I vaguely remember one time, but
Okay.
but I'm not sure. And
Yeah.
there was some talk about ticks and things like that.
Okay. And then the Azevedos bring up dogs in Newell as part of the lease agreement? And they know that we're allowing dogs up there? If that's the case, then I can step down. We've spent so much time talking about dogs in Newell. So if they're fine with it, yay.
Yeah, I met with them several times to talk about the grazing license, and that was not a topic of conversation or concern. And since that grazing license has been active, and I have a really good relationship with the Azevedos. They call me quite frequently. That's not a topic of concern that I've heard about. However, it doesn't mean that we couldn't consider that in the future and change that position. It's just, the reality is, when I go hiking up there, I see dogs. Mm-hmm. They're up there. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be a bigger educational thing that we would really need to consider if we're going to make that change, because I think this community is used to that type of activity.
Okay, yeah, I just was concerned because it was a grazing issue at one point. And then on the e-bikes, I spent a fair amount of time today trying to research, are e-bikes in general allowed on trails, and it seems to be a jurisdictional issue. And it seems like that's a much bigger nut to crack. So thank you.
Regarding the dogs, isn't there a sign that says no dogs past the first gate?
Yeah, so there is signage out there that Commissioner Mattson did bring to my attention that we severely need to update. There's things on there that are not listed on this list, and vice versa. So again, once we solidify what type of passive recreational use that is permitted up there, with the blessing of the land trust, we can go about changing those signage and make sure that they are up to date. Because there is quite, I know Commissioner Hughes has spent a lot of time trying to update our boards and make it look pretty, and I know there's additional work that needs to be done out there.
And does the land trust have an opinion on dogs affecting flora and fauna in the open spaces?
The land trust does not allow dogs on our permanent preserve system. On the lands that the land trust owns and manages, we do not allow dogs on those properties.
So is the Newell considered one of those properties?
No, we don't own it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
And
but the question was, what is our opinion? So our stance is that on our properties that we manage and own, we don't allow dogs because there is some impact to both wildlife and the flora on properties. And I say this as a dog owner, I totally understand. I love to take my dog out, believe me. But the problem is not all dogs are on leash, not all dogs are under voice command, and not all owners are willing to abide by those rules. So our policy is to say no dogs on our preserves.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a follow-on question? So and I know Ally just talked about the management plan is, we don't always follow it directly. Does the conservation easement reference Lynch Canyon at all? Because the management plan regarding dogs references following Lynch Canyon's rules, which I don't know if it's actually maintain consistency of policies for the adjacent interconnected Lynch Canyon, which does not allow dogs. So that's where I kind of got in this loop of.
I don't think that the easement does. No, that would
Yeah.
be an overstep of a conservation easement to impose things from a different property. But I can say we're working on a project right now where the access is through State Parks land. State Parks does not allow dogs. There go the property that's being protected for public access also won't allow dogs. So it does take into consideration the neighboring access and points like that. So it's a point of consideration. Because managing dogs and dog owners it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And we have a conservation easement over Alston Park, which is also a city park for dog use, both on leash and off leash, and it's fun.
I think we'll just see what happens over time, you know? If it turns into an issue, then we need to deal with it, but
Yeah.
thanks.
And on that same note, you said that the document is kind of like a draft. I mean, it could be changed in the future. So as far as like the no camping, if a program or a group wanted to support something like that, management of something like that, maybe that could come back?
Yeah, and the reason, yes, to your question, yes. Everything is up for consideration, and it really does come down to the resources and the oversight of that program. Right now, we don't have oversight to manage overnight camping. The city does not have the resources to do that. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't have those resources in the future if we wanted to expand that program. So again, the great thing about the conservation easement is that it identifies approved different types of passive recreation, and one of those is camping. So if I went to Lena and said, I want to do open night camping for X amount of days, that would be something that I would need to discuss with Lena and have a conversation with her about, because we've never talked about having camping. Although it's approved in the easement, that conversation still needs to happen, and that with the land trust, so that way they are comfortable with that type of activity.
All right, Commissioner Hughes.
Hello. My comment was going to be in regards to most immediately the e-bikes. I wanted to point out that there are different classifications of e-bikes. I think you guys are aware, right? Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. Are you suggesting that, well, e-bikes aren't going to be allowed at all?
So I'm from the perspective of the conservation easement, bikes in general are under review of the land trust. It doesn't matter class 1, class 2, class 3, bikes in general, although it is an an identified passive recreational use, there is an asterisk next to that specific activity. And under 4.7 of the conservation easement, it actually says that biking in general will be reviewed and evaluated by the land trust. So if we were to consider biking up in Newell including e-bikes and mountain biking, that would need to be a conversation with the land trust. And then I'm going to punt the remainder of what that process looks like with the land trust to you.
Yeah, there's the notification in 4.7. There's also the strict prohibition in paragraph 3.8, which says the operation of any motorized vehicle for any purpose except for emergency use, permitted agricultural or residential uses, or for maintenance of the property or permitted facilities. That's a prohibition. So that would be something with regards to e-bikes. We understand that it's an evolving recreational use. We have received many, many stories from partner land trusts across the country and other open space areas, managers who are wrestling with the same challenge. It's when conservation easements are drafted, they're drafted at a certain point of time, and things change and technology changes and uses sometimes change. So a lot of our review, and in terms of the application from the city with regards to this, would then be to assess what is the available information we have, what is the data that corresponds to it, and at the end of the day, we need to assess this based on the original purpose and conservation values of the conservation easement. So it's, as Ally said, like, all things are still for consideration. Some things will be more considered.
So in other properties that you manage,
No e-bikes.
no e-bikes. But in most regional parks, state parks, I think Class 1 e-bikes are allowed, pedal assist.
It's jurisdictional.
It is
It's
jurisdictional.
actually,
But overwhelmingly, it's coming to a point where, what's that?
Including Lynch, there's a sign that says Class 1 e-bikes are allowed, they follow the same rules as regular mountain bikes. This is a Class.
So we can't be engaging with the public.
Oh,
we have to
sorry.
wait for
We have
public
to open them.
comment. So we need to stay on topic. And again, I'm
Sure.
just gonna respond. We have a great relationship with Lynch Canyon. What they do in Lynch Canyon does not. They do not dictate what we do in our property. We answer to the Napa County Land Trust. That is the person who holds the property rights to that property. I understand that Lynch may do things, and they are also only open on the weekends. There's many different nuances with the properties and who manages those properties, and we want to be respectful to that. However, when we're dealing with Newell, we deal with the land trust and what we can and cannot do on our property. They do not have jurisdiction over our property and vice versa. And I need to make that very clear because we do butt up. And the reason why we don't have a fence is because of the open and active grazing that occurs between the three properties of Azevedo, Lynch, and Newell. If there was no active grazing with one rancher on all three properties, there would be a fence because the properties really the rules do not apply across those boundaries. And I just need to make that very clear.
Yeah, no, and I totally get that. I understand there are two different parks. I'm just a little surprised because there's been bikes up there for a long time, and it goes beyond e-bikes. It actually suggests we need to discuss bikes, which is a passive recreation. So where would that come from? Like, I'm thinking back to what, 1998? I mean, why would that be a concern?
I
Bicycles.
was not working for the land trust in 1998. I do not know what the Newell family intended with that language. I have only the language that's in the book and what's in the management plan.
Okay, so it's up for discussion.
And we are aware that bikes are up there. We know that, we see it. But then this is an activity that we need to have a conversation with the land trust because just as much as the cattle may cause damage, also different types of passive recreation causes just as much damage in some shapes or forms. So this is one of those conversations that we would need to talk about and make sure that, again, the activities that we're doing up there is approved and blessed by the land trust. It is important that we have a great working relationship with them because at any time they can come in and just stop public access. They have that right. They have that right to come in and say, public access is not part of our goals and initiatives of preserving and conserving this property. It's not part of our mission, and at any time they can take those public access rights away if the city does not respect the land trust and does not understand the relationship and how important the land trust is to managing and operating that property.
So I guess my question would be to you, is there any reason bikes wouldn't be allowed up there? Aside from some old verbiage in the land trust or the easement, conservation easement?
I don't know that I'm prepared to make any determination one way or the other. I would say we have bikes on existing preserved properties. The number is very few of those, but they do have adequate infrastructure to be able to support that type of use. So it's just, it depends, but like I said also in the last commission meeting, there are times when our preserves are closed. Hikers, bikers, anybody using it. Sometimes it's open just for hiking. It's not open for biking because of the wet conditions, and that may be other pieces that we consider. So there's a lot of pieces up in the air, so we address that based on, it's really a property by property assessment of how does that suit the conservation values for that property.
Okay. I guess my next question is, when does the conversation take place?
Here, it takes place here.
Here tonight?
I wouldn't say we're going to make any decisions this evening because it has to be a bigger conversation than that. It's like Lena said, she's not prepared to make an evaluation and a decision. This would be an ongoing conversation. We would have to sit down with Lena and talk about the types of bikes that would be allowed up there, the conditions of when they would be allowed up there. Lena, when she was here last time, she discussed that, sometimes bikes are not allowed up there during wet and conditions. They're only allowed up there seasonally. And then the other turnaround question is, how do we enforce that? How does the city enforce? We're already having a challenging way of enforcing dogs and other activities. So how would we enforce and making sure that our community is respecting the rules that are set to preserve that property? Because that would be the city's requirement. The land trust comes down and says, yes, this is approved, and once it's approved, we have to manage and operate it to what's been approved. So that it's going to be a bigger conversation than that. Here tonight is to talk about, again, we're going to focus, talk about what the public access efforts that we've made, what we're doing up there today, and so that way we can really solidify that, because there's been a lot of great efforts that have been made, and we really want to make sure that this is memorialized, so that way we can talk about updating the management plan, and that would be that conversation of the type of bike use and then the maintenance and management of the preserve to support that type of recreational activity.
Commissioner Mattson?
Where am I? I'm really glad we're talking about the bicycle issue, and I agree it is a bigger conversation, an evaluation. Where was I? There's a couple of things that were in the management plan and the rules that are posted at Newell that I don't see here. One is trails may be closed at any time, and I think that's something that's a no-brainer, but I wasn't sure if it should be included here. And then also the management plan had this, no social trails or entry into closed areas. Does that need to be stated in this agreement, or is it that just typical, operating, you assume that's going to be the case?
I'm trying to think. So those are rules that are posted on a board at the preserve right now?
Trails may be closed at any time is posted there. But the no social trails or no entry into closed areas is in the management plan.
Oh, I was going to say, as a land manager, I think both of those are smart decisions. Today was 95 degrees up in Napa. It's not a great time for people to be hiking in the heat. There's also still severe fire danger. So we close all of our preserves when there's red flag, when there's windy days, when it's over such temperature because of potential fire risk. So I think, but at the same time, we will also close the preserves after an atmospheric river event, what that comes through and the trails are not suitable or the road, like that type of stuff. So there's a safety component with regards to having the option as a land manager to close properties.
And I think we
Kinda can't even
the
imagine
city
why.
operates that way already.
Yes.
With Newell, but I just wasn't sure if it had to be memorialized in this document. Or,
So Commissioner Mattson, if you look right above it, there is closures. It says Newell Open Space Preserve is open year-round and may close periodically due to red flag warnings, excessive heat, and inclement weather. So
Yeah.
I think that captures that it could be closed at any time. And we can absolutely add that language to make sure that it's consistent.
yeah, and it's because I saw it in the general park rules that are posted
Thank you
there.
so much for doing
Yeah,
that.
you know how
I really
get.
do
Very good.
appreciate you doing that. Thank
Thanks.
you.
I think with the social trails, it's also a land management issue. There's both a consideration for the fragmentation of habitat when you have social trails that result. And then there is also just simply a management in terms of what if this eroded and then it was washed away, so somebody created a trail around it, and the trail around it is not in an any better location, it also can wash away. So prevention of social trails is, again, I would say a responsible management aspect. There are places here in the county that have public access that have had issues with social trails resulting. We've had them on our preserve as well and worked quite hard to both close them and then restore them. And I would say it's much harder to do the restoration than it was to create them in the first place. So if there's a way to encourage people to stay on trails, to stay on existing trails, if there's plans as part of any recreation to expand a trail network, like those are also pieces to make sure that those trails are then sited in the best locations so that there's not fragmentation, so that there's not impacts or potential erosion. So there's all sorts of different pieces to it. They can be codified as specifically as you would like in the management plan or include kind of a general statement to such effect in terms of that. I believe it does regards siting of new trails. There's some reference to where new trails would be.
And I'm just going to add, also under conservation easement on page 6, 4.4, it does say that any new construction of any new trails has to be approved by the land trust. So we would not be able to just go up there and just build new trails. That would have to be, again, an additional conversation with a plan, which includes a lot of conversations, because then we would have to pull in the city engineer, and it's not just go up there and just build a trail. It's again, it's one of those bigger conversations. And I know that there is some concern about the current trail system that we have out there. And we have brought in the city engineer, several city engineers out to take a look at and evaluate it. And if at any time we feel that those trails are going to fail, that we'll start having that conversation with the land trust and really consider a new path of travel.
Okay, so does it make sense to put stay on existing trails into this list of rules? That's not too restrictive, right? It's just kind of a stay on the existing trails?
Well, currently right now, I didn't see anything in the land management, and Lena, please correct me, but there's nothing in the land management where people, we don't have any barriers that tell people they can't go in certain places other than gates and fences, right? So we ask them to stay on the trails, but there's not really a mechanism that's keeping them on the trails out there right now. So technically, there actually are some trails that people they're following cattle trails, and they're using those as trails right now. So it kind of is it's a little vague, it's a little broad, but it's. Lena, do you have any? I
mean, I would say it's, as a recreational user, I would say that's a pretty standard rule. Please stay on the trails. Please avoid sensitive areas. Much like dog owners, people choose to obey or not obey with that. So I think if it's intended as a more strict adherence, then there needs to be the capacity and the resources to be able to enforce that.
I think it could be seen as a subtle reminder.
Sure. I think you could put things like pack it in, pack it out, and stay on the trails, like all of the typical recreational use that you would expect for more, I won't say backcountry, but more like wildland type of recreation.
Yeah, and I did notice a very nice trail a number of years ago, and I realized the cattle had created it. I was like, there's a social trail. No, it's a cattle trail. Thanks.
They do that.
So, quick question, are we actually having troubles with people up there going off trail?
I haven't noticed necessarily. I think a lot of it is that the cattle create trails and then they look like interesting locations to go. So it's already compacted from the traversing of, and it's never just one cow, right? Like they'll kind of follow each other and then they go to some other spot. So you end up with some compaction anyways. So I've been guilty of that when I'm doing monitoring visits and I follow deer trails and I'm like, oh, hey, where'd that go? And then I get to a spot and go, not an actual trail. Okay, I'm gonna go back the way I came. So I haven't noticed it in the times that I've been out there. I think usually I can attribute them to cattle use.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot. Allie, are we having problems?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And Newell is just one big loop, right? I mean, is
It's
it,
mostly a loop. It's got a couple of offshoot roads that don't really go anywhere because then they leave onto other properties.
it's like Prairie Ridge, right? Is that part of Newell?
Well, there's the one that connects obviously over to Lynch. There's one that connects north to some other private conservation easements that way as well. So there are other ones. There's even one that takes you out towards the PG&E tower above the high school, but they don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's be like you go out and you come right back.
Essentially, everybody pretty much loops around when they go up, because anytime I ride Newell, I'll loop
Do the
around.
loop. That's how I do the hike too.
Yeah, and then, we jump into Lynch Canyon from there as well. So, in regards to.
Excuse me, there's a line, sorry.
Sorry.
Don't forget to use your light.
One more statement.
Okay.
In regards to the trail that we're talking about, the loop trail, would it be considered a ranch road or is it actual trail?
The ranch road network is considered actually a complete public trail network.
Okay. But those they're one and the same, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So we do have cars rolling over them on occasion, or agricultural vehicles.
PG&E, yes.
PG&E and sometimes the ranchers, right?
The ranchers.
The city's been up there.
City staff.
I've seen the fire department up there.
Mhm.
Okay. Cool, sorry.
Commissioner Christian.
Thank you. Nance, you referenced a document earlier of whether it was a draft. Or what is that document? I don't know if I have it in my package.
Oh.
It's attachment 2. This is the document that's really the operations and maintenance procedures that have been
Attachment
drafted.
two. Did I get one of those?
It's
Page-
after
page
the Newell
145.
management plan, so it's kind of buried
The
in your
end?
package.
Is that the dated October 4th?
There is page 145 of your packet.
145. Okay. Oh, I should have one here. California Environmental Protection Agents? No, that's 147. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Great. So I know what we're working on. Okay, number 2, can we get a copy of Lynch Canyon's management plan? It was mentioned in our management plan. It was created in 1999, around the same time. And I'm thinking if we're going to work on our management plan, we'd want to look at what our neighbors are doing to get some ideas and maybe help inform us. So maybe if all the commissioners could get that for maybe in the next packet or something.
Yeah, I can actually email that out to everybody because we, in addition, can everybody confirm that they received the management plan, the working document that I emailed?
You mean a document that we could actually edit?
Yes.
I didn't
I sent it
see
in
that.
When
When was it?
a couple
Last
weeks
week?
ago.
Yeah,
I'll look in my emails.
10 days ago maybe.
Haven't seen it.
It's like a Google Doc, but it's basically takes this entire plan and puts it where you can then create comments.
It's not the old Adobe, that restaurant up in Napa?
Yeah, that one.
Okay, and Lenny, the statement that you read, I could go find it, but I didn't hear you mention anything about a motorized wheelchair.
I don't know if wheelchairs are considered vehicles.
They're not considered vehicles. So would not fall under
It's not a motorized vehicle.
recreation equipment or motorized vehicles.
Okay,
A bicycle is considered a vehicle?
Yes, actually, we
public
have language
transportation.
in other conservation easements that rather than saying bicycle, what it says is a mechanized vehicle, and that we have been told is a bicycle.
Okay,
I'm just,
I'm just thinking in terms of,
Who made that call?
a lawyer did.
I'm just thinking in terms of people who can ride a bike,
Mhm.
but they don't have the stamina or the strength to, keep up or go up a hill. And the e-bike does allow that, and it's not going any faster than what a good cyclist could pedal. So to me, just a matter of reasonableness, I would think that that would be something we would want our population to be able to take advantage of and use, rather than say, oh no, this is a strict interpretation here and we're just not gonna consider it. I mean, I'm hoping we have some leeway here.
I would say part of the discussion that will have to be ongoing for these types of things is what we would want to see is, do you have data that supports that that is a desired use by a population with that type of need? Like, for those, do they want to does somebody?
I think I'm seeing a few of them here in our audience.
Well, that's a
not
that's
to
a
cast
bicycle.
aspersions.
I thought we were talking about a wheelchair.
Oh,
So I'm just saying.
talking about an e-bike, yeah.
But then that would be part of it. So, those would be data points that we would want to be able to consider. We would also be talking to other partners that have these or don't have these types of uses on their property. So it's just, I don't always get to write the rules. I just have the job of trying to interpret them
Yeah.
as they're written.
So Commissioner Christian, I'm just going to interrupt really quick. So earlier when we were talking about this, e-bikes is put on the list because this has not been a conversation with the land trust yet. We have not gotten approval from the land trust to have that type of recreational activity up there. It does not mean that it could not be a possibility in the future. It just means that we need to make this part of that conversation when we update the management plan and talk about the public access and how we're going to manage and operate an open space preserve with active cattle that's open to the public. How are we going to manage that with the different types of needs that are out there and still meet the goals of the land trust? So at this time, it's not approved. That's why it's on this list, because this is documenting all the activities and all the work that has been done since 2015 by this great community to get public access. However, it does not mean that we cannot talk about that in the future and have those conversations with the land trust and have that be considered. We're just not there yet. We're not going to get there this evening. This is a very big conversation, bikes in general, per the conservation easement, as we've already outlined. So bikes in general is going to be a bigger conversation of what that looks like with that property and with the land trust feeling comfortable with that type of activity.
Yeah, and I think some of the audience might be wanting to speak with that when we get to public comment. But considering that we're discussing it, Sean Hughes's question earlier was, when does that happen? Because we are discussing this. So those are my opinions. That's my input on this question. And maybe it'll come back as another agenda item. But I feel like it's appropriate to talk about it now because that's what the subject is. So I wanted to put my opinion out there. And then in regard to section 4.7 and the question of bicycles themselves, and it says, the plan will also examine possible restrictions on the use of bicycles on the property, with consideration being given to such factors as the potential threat of erosion and other harm to the terrain. I'm not sure that bicycles, I've seen no evidence that bicycles up there are causing erosion or harm to the terrain. The nature of the proposed uses, I'm not sure what that means. And then finally, the ability of grantors to afford the cost of mitigating any damage to the property or injury to other users of the property that might be caused by such proposed bicycle uses. And that's a matter of insurance. You can buy insurance for potential conflicts between bicycles and pedestrians. And it's hard to imagine that a bicycle is going to cause property damage up there. I can understand the reason for this being in here. There's some trails where bicycles are causing significant erosion, and that's been a historical problem since bikes came on. But then again, the bicyclists learned that they had to advocate and come and show up on trail days and work on trails so that they could protect their right to ride trails. So none of this, to me, seems at this point a reason to prohibit bicycles on the property. And I listened to everything you said, and so this is my opinion. I have to speculate here, but the Newell family came in, and under the first, I have it right here, Section I in the recitals. Immediately following this grant of a conservation easement, grantors intend to donate the underlying fee simple interest in the property to the City of American Canyon in order to create the Jacombees Newell open space. It is the intention of grantors that the open space be passively used by the public for hiking, horseback riding, bicycling, picnicking, etc. And I imagine, I'm speculating, that the Newell family had that. This is in the easement itself. This is the legal point. The other part is in here too, but I would suspect that the land trust had some input, because the Newells didn't write this whole document, had some input on this idea of examining possible restrictions on the use of bicycles. If I had to, or if I had the power to, I would give more weight to what the donors actually requested that this property be used for. And if there is some serious problems with the bicycles, then I would say, yeah, we have to be able to account for that and maybe restrict them. But I'm not seeing any of it, anything that couldn't be mitigated by some insurance. They're not going to cause property damage. There will be some conflicts, but I think it would be really sad if we said no more bikes because one person got hurt with a bike and run into a pedestrian and that's it, but can't do it. So I would lean towards the original intent of the grantors. And one other thing, Randy Anderson in this thing talked about the contradictions, because one statement in the plan says that restoration of the property is the highest priority. But then again, in December 1999, Jacombees donated the the Newell property to be dedicated as public open space for the citizens of the city and the region to enjoy forever, and to protect valuable agricultural and natural resources. So notice what's first there. Donated a scenic 640-acre to the City of American Canyon to be dedicated as public open space for the citizens of the city and the region to enjoy forever, comma, and to protect valuable agricultural and natural resources. And later on, Randy Anderson describes the three major goals. So one is the agriculture, one is the natural resources, and one is the public open space. And he said it's a challenge. It's going to be really tough to do all that because it is a contradiction. But he said he was optimistic that it could be done. And this is the process that we do to hash this all out. But I'm optimistic that we can figure that all out and work together. Maybe the North Loop Trail is for bikes and the South Loop Trail is for the cattle. I don't know. But there's a lot of possibilities here. And I am not going to vote anytime soon to ban bicycles from Newell Open Space. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Artis.
Director Ikeda, I was wondering if you could define, as in the agenda, memorialize the public access efforts. So what exactly are we meaning by memorialize at this point?
Attachment 2 is our efforts into acknowledging all the great work that this community has done with the help of the Land Trust to memorialize the public access efforts that have made since 2015 and to what we are currently doing now. So attachment 2 is identifying the types of passive recreation use that the Land Trust has given the city approval to be a part of the public access efforts, as well as what we are currently doing to manage and operate that property. in addition to the types of projects that have already been approved to improve that property for public access. So that's attachment 2.
Got it. In terms of, I mean, also, so it's not like codifying or locking in anything at this point. We are simply just what has been done to this stage.
Correct. So with the management plan, and remember, the conservation easement supersedes the management plan.
That's correct.
So the conservation easement, the Newells could have easily just given the city the property, and we wouldn't be sitting here with a conservation easement telling us what we can and cannot do. That wasn't done. They chose to put it into an easement and then give it to the city. And so that's where the land trust has property rights and tells us what we can and cannot do. The management plan was created after the fact with this idea that the community wanted to foreshadow and look at what that property potentially could be. It aligns with the conservation easement, but it doesn't actually tell us that we have public access. It stops. It tells us this could be the possibility. But in 2015, when we did get public access, we didn't update the management plan. We didn't update it to reflect what we are doing. And since then, we've been working through conversations and emails and whatever other mechanism past directors and city officials have done to work with the land trust to grant us the ability to do the things that we're doing up there now without physically updating the management plan. So that's what we're here tonight, is to document that officially and memorialize that the land trust is here this evening to talk about, that this is the type of stuff that was approved by the land trust and what the city's doing now. So that way we can, one, document it, and two, hopefully update the management plan and also talk about other uses that potentially could be in addition to what we're currently doing now.
Got it. And so is the update for the management plan intended, or will it include a review of the current site conditions, wildlife resources and opportunities, even those needs or constraints? Is that, or is it only going to be limited to public access update?
Yeah, we were not. Last meeting, we talked about how the management plan in its current state is still a valuable document. The land trust expressed that they're not interested in updating the management plan in sections 1 or 2. They actually think it's a very good document in its current condition. The one piece that is missing is the public access and how to manage and operate an open space preserve with public access. And so what we are proposing is adding a section 3 that outlines that.
Yeah. Excellent. And then also, have there been consistent studies, say, conducted on the preserve over the last 20 years since the management plan has been done, and or impacts with since having granted public access to that?
So back in, please forgive me because we talked about this last meeting and I don't have I believe in 2018 we had a consultant come out and they actually did a biological survey of the areas of that project. The project was to develop a natural spring up on the upper portions of the trail for the cattle, because right now the only water source is Lynch Canyon. That's why it's open and active grazing. That survey did do a biological survey. It did do a bird. It did all the things that need to do in the areas that it was going to be impacted, and it was very consistent to the plan that we have today. That is a valuable resource for us. I can send that all to you as well. It was discussed back in 2018 with the intent of making that project come to life. The Azevedos have no interest in having that project come to life, that we would actually need their buy-in for that. But it doesn't make that report any less important for us.
Maybe the mitigation efforts?
The plan itself. So we had a consultant come out and do the biological survey and look at the project and how that would work.
What I mean is that when there's been mitigation efforts to offset development, maybe that had some kind of survey involved?
I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. I don't recall seeing that in there. It was just more of like, is this project feasible? And recognizing that there would I'm going to have to get back to you on that question.
Yeah. And so the biological survey that was conducted, is this public access then in full been under full review and in conjunction with the biological survey that has been conducted and or updated? And have there been annual surveys I saw that with some of the public access just in relation to mowings and things like that? There's certain timings for certain species, or actually times a year, a small window for conducting a survey before mowings. But I noticed that there's also potential other species that would be there that are not affected by those particular times. And so, especially when we're talking, this time of year, there's other species that can come in there, and that can also have a great impact by having dogs or other vehicles or things that are in there as well. And so I'm curious, and that's kind of where all my line of questioning was going, is without seeing like the biological survey or having access to that at this moment, I don't know if I'm comfortable being able to memorialize a public access without having an understanding of exactly what species and resources are on site or how those could be impacted by allowing some of the public access.
So the management plan did the biological survey. It did the, it outlines all the species and all the flora and fauna that are up
20
there.
years ago though, right?
Correct. Correct. Not a lot. The topography hasn't changed very much. And maybe Lena can step in if I botch this terribly. But to your answer, when we obtained this, so this is more just documenting what we're doing, but to your point, we did not do an additional survey when all this stuff was going on. What we did was we took the current management plan in its current state, and we worked with the land trust to get that approval that was already outlined as approved passive recreation. Since then, we have not done any additional surveys up there other than what is required of us to manage and operate that facility. And that's just to maintain it for vegetation management. And that actually might even be changing too. Again, to answer your question, in the last 20 years, no, we have not done any additional surveys in regards to the public access piece of this property. And
so if this is going to be then added to a management plan 20 years, say after the fact or after resources have been surveyed, to me it would make sense, especially as everybody here has been talking about climate change and shifting things, that this is obviously and potentially an impact that there could be changes to species or loss or additions or just a migratory change, especially with species like burrowing owls and things like that, that are prime potential habitat there and have been extirpated in breeding sites all across the counties in California. And so if we're making some public access opportunities without having, say, the latest up-to-date information, that actually doesn't make sense to me, because we're going off of 20-year data, and I don't think any agency or scientific body would go off of 20-year data to make an update to a management plan.
Okay, thank you. Director Ikeda, you mentioned that the easement takes precedent over the management plan. So I recognize that. I did want to point out, though, that in the management plan on agenda packet page 70, I-7 for the management plan, or 1-7, I'm not sure what that is. The third bullet point does say need and opportunity for coordination of use and management with the adjacent Lynch Canyon Open Space Preserve. I think that's something a good neighbor thing to do, is that we consider their plan and at least have eyes on it, and maybe we take some ideas from there. And I understand, we don't have to be confined to what they're doing, but I think it's something that we should respectfully look at. And looking at their rules for Lynch Canyon, they do post in their rules, do not leave designated trails or climb fences. And I think this is important for our community. We had the orienteering project, and in that we had to make clear that because orienteering could take you off trail. You're just going between GPS coordinates, not necessarily staying on trail. So that was something that, the committee at the time wanted to respect staying on trails so that we wouldn't damage, potentially other, flora and fauna out there. And I do think, if, they thought it was important enough to put it on their rules. I think it's something for us to consider as well. And I do think that in this community, we have the potential of trail users that maybe Newell is the only place they've ever hiked. They're not used to, all the other wildlands and the pack it in, pack it out, kind of stuff. So I'd like to call that out. It does also call out a mountain bike speed limit, and bicyclists shall call out a ring bell before passing. I think that most bicyclers know, that is good practice too. It's just respectful to, other people, but I think that's maybe something else to incorporate into the rules. I had a question for Lena about the other trust properties. Are horses allowed on all other trust properties?
I don't think we have the parking infrastructure that would suit for horse trailers on most of our preserves. I think there's a question, many of our preserves have access constraints. They're either over access easements, so we have to pass through other private property to get to them. They are narrow ranch roads. There may not be a suitable turnaround or there may not even be a parking area. So I can't think of one that has horses currently. And I can't remember if Wild Lake is allowed to have horses. That is a good question. I don't know.
So we probably don't have data in the county of the impact of horses on trails in
not on
land use
public
properties.
Skyline Park would be probably the best local source. It would be to check with Skyline because they are a local park that has all three user types of hikers, bikers, and horseback riders.
Okay.
Moore Creek too.
Yes, Moore Creek as well. So, but yeah, I think you would need to check with those entities, the Skyline Park Wilderness Association or the Open Space District for Moore Creek.
All right. Well, we do allow horses in our open space. And one of the things in, reading in preparation for this meeting I came across, it seems pretty widespread that most surveys have showed that horses do more damage than bikes. So we do allow horses here. So it seems like bikes should just come along with that then.
Is that are you asking if we permit bikes? I think that's, I think the question that is there has been no restrictions in terms of the mountain biking use on the property. I think the question is we've not ever had the conversation about e-bikes on the property. So mountain bikers, as far as I know, are also continuing to use the Newell Preserve and as our horseback riders. So we are not conducting those surveys. What we would require is an examination of the impacts of those. I guess we look at all of the types of data and would be working with the property owner to make the suitable and responsible choices so that they reflect the conservation values and the purpose of the conservation easement that are outlined. So that's pretty much the boundaries that I have to go on.
Okay, thank you. Something else I'd like to point out is that our council goals and objectives state under the outdoors and recreation to facilitate the development of interconnected trail systems. This is a very important trail for us to be able to access the Ridge Trail, which does allow bikes. So it seems like that's the way, if we want to get bike on the Ridge Trail, we would need to use the Newell Trail to get there to do that, unless we were forced to go outside of our city boundaries in order to access that by bike.
again, what type of bike. Like right now, there's not any constraint on a mountain bike without any type of.
Well, it sounds like it's up for debate. Is that correct?
So right now, to what Lena's trying to say is we don't have any restrictions on the type of bike. The only restrictions that we have right now to date is e-bikes. So right now up in Newell, people can mountain bike. We are going to need to write that into the plan, and there will be, we will most likely have conditions around that type of use, closing the park when it's wet, not allowing mountain biking when the trails are wet, things like that. But in the current state right now, there are no restrictions other than no e-bikes up there. When we start developing the management plan, that's where we're going to start getting down into the fine nitty-gritty of hours of operations, when do we close, the type of passive recreation, during inclement weather, do we even allow hikers up there? Everything is going to be considered, everything is going to be talked about, because as it currently sits right now with what we have in front of us, the approved types of passive recreation use that we have solidified with the land trust is hiking, horseback riding, bicycling. And the reason why it has an asterisk there is because that's in the current easement right now, and we haven't defined that. But in its current state, there's no restrictions on bicycling. Casual picnicking, wildlife observation, nature study, environmental education, photography, kite flying, scenery, and meditating. So when we start talking about expanding the management plan to focus around the public access piece and how we're going to operate and manage it, this is where those conversations are going to come up. When do we close? When are we open? What is the ideal condition of the trail for each of these activities? The type of activity, you know, is there a seasonality to this type of activity? That's where you're going to get down into managing and operating an open space preserve that has public access. We're going to add that to the plan, and that's where those conversations, and that's where the land trust is going to come in. That's where they're going to sit there and say, well, where's the data? We need additional information. You know, they're going to have their restrictions, and they're going to have their points that they're going to have to meet to make sure that that management plan fits their goals and their mission, and hopefully fits with our community's need. But we can't promise that, because again, the conservation easement has a property right, and they get to tell us what we can and cannot do up there. But as the plan currently sits right now, there's no restrictions other than no e-bikes up there.
Okay. So I would like to add then about the e-bikes that I would like to echo what Commissioner Christian was saying, that it does give an opportunity for people that otherwise could not ride a bike up a steep hill like that chance. And it's unfortunate to draw a line, you know, and not allow others, those type of people, to be able to ride up there. Okay. I don't remember who was first between you two.
I think the flashing, isn't it the flashing?
Everybody's has been on for a long time.
Isn't
Okay.
it the
I
one
think
that's
it's
flashing is the one that's been there the longest?
no, I don't
Doesn't
think
work
so.
that way?
I don't
I
know.
thought
Can
it
you
was.
guys tell the set?
Is it, Liz might
Okay.
know. So there's, all of them are lit up, and one of them's flashing. Is the one that's flashing the one that's been waiting the longest?
That's the one that's next.
I think it is.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who's next?
I am.
Well, earlier it was only Artis and Matson lit.
But
And Christian
mine's-
wasn't mit.
Mine's flashing.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Christian.
Oh, me? Thank you. Okay, I just want to strongly agree with Commissioner Ortiz and reinforce what he said about the biological monitoring. It's not just 20 years. The plan was written in 1999. And we're a few months away from 2024. So that's 25 years. Plus, on top of that, they used the environmental impact report from the NorCal attempt to build a garbage dump up at Newell Preserve, they used data from that environmental impact report to populate this this management plan study. So that goes back probably another 5, maybe 10 years. So you're almost at 30 years on the age of it. The Newell Management Plan, Part 2, Use and Management Program. Overview. Part 2 of the management plan specifies the policies and actions for management, improvement, and public use of the preserve. And that's on page, it's 2.1, and it goes through 2.8. So there's about 8 pages here. And it's things like monitoring and management. Develop an agreement with the California Native Plant Society or Natural Resources Conservation Service or local universities and or other qualified botanists to annually monitor and report on the condition of native plant populations and habitat and help identify and coordinate needed protection and restoration action. That's only the first page. There's 8 pages here. Isolate riparian corridors or create setbacks from cattle grazing. Regularly monitor the population of Rivus pictoris and other special status or unusual plants. Minimize grading. Minimize impact of serpentine bunchgrass community. There's one here about controlling cutbacks from streams by placing something in them. So this is 8 pages. This has never been done. The city's never put any money into monitoring the Newell Preserve. We don't even have a city staff person that goes up there once a week to look at the property. So if you're riding an e-bike, I don't know who's going to write you a ticket, and I don't think that it's even been turned into an ordinance that you would have to pay a ticket. So, I mean, we might be spinning our wheels here. But I think the biological monitoring needs to be done, and for us, as Scott has said, for us to start and use that as the basis of a management plan update it would make me very uncomfortable too, that we don't have a baseline. We haven't been doing the recommendations in the plan that we have. And I don't want to knock the city too much on it. They don't have the money, they don't have the staff. And city council hasn't really expressed the will or to put money up there, and maybe that's because the community hasn't put the money up there. But it hasn't been done. So we're way behind on that. I had something else, but I forgot what it was, so I'll stop there.
Okay, Commissioner Hughes?
Okay, finally, we're going left to right, or right to left. And I wanted to actually, in regards to Scott and Barry's comments, is there a timeline or a protocol or a frequency at which you would typically stop and do a biological survey or an environmental impact report, even on a property that's in, so to speak, in service?
That's hard for me to answer because we have biologists on staff, and so we're frequently going out and looking at that. We work with other contractors that are engaged in habitat restoration projects, so they're frequently doing monitoring of certain sites or different things. So it's hard for me to answer that. I would say that like a management plan is not intended to last 23 years. Management plans are supposed to be adaptive. If they're older than 5 years, they're already out of date type of a thing. So in terms of addressing uses within a management plan, it's always good to have more current data to be able to inform those decisions. So like when we do projects like that on our preserves, it's management plan. I guess I've seen management plans kind of constructed in 2 different ways. You can be very specific. This one's very specific. There's a lot of really cool information in it that can be carried forward. Could also be considered as more an operational plan instead. And then a management plan might be like a bigger picture and say, we want to address invasives, we want to address habitat, and how that goes about is a little more in flux, because then it's not so specific. So there's different ways to be able to do that. Like I said, it's hard for me to say because we work with a local botanist, and we'll have him go out and do surveys for us on the regular for our preserves or for our conservation easement properties. Or we have herpetologists or avian, like I won't say avian scientists, but I would say lots of birders like to go out on our properties, and they will then report back. And so we will consider those actually adequate and informed pieces of information for us to be able to look and go, hey, this property has a high population of X species, like we want to make sure to address that. Or was how we discovered monarch butterflies have reached a northern property of ours, so how do we want to address that and start incorporating that into restoration? So it's just, we're out on the properties, and then to that point, we have the capacity and the professional training to be able to incorporate that into a lot of our day-to-day work.
So in this case, it's the city's job, or is it,
For the management,
yeah, for the survey?
the
If there
city
was-
owns the property.
Yep. Okay, so it would be our job.
There are grants available.
Yeah. So then my other question was, so this, I'm going to beat you up about this 4.7. You know, in regards to the bikes again, there's an item here on prohibited uses, 3.12. It says, any use or activity that causes or is likely to cause soil degradation or erosion or pollution of any surface, subsurface waters. When I read that, and I think about the cattle most immediately, and then I go to the, because I think the big concern about bicycles is erosion, right? And I'm just putting this in your head for
No,
future
I'm
conversation.
going to stop you. So I think one of the things, and I wanted to say this last week, and with the technical issues, it wasn't allowed. I can appreciate the efforts to interpret it and all of that stuff. It's not as simple as just reading one provision. If you look at the general clause under prohibited uses, it says any activity on or use of the property inconsistent with the purpose of this deed of easement is prohibited. Without limiting the generality of the foregoing, these following activities are expressly prohibited except as expressly permitted. So then grazing is an express permission. So we have this back and forth. So yes, it can say any activity or use that would incite soil erosion, but then I have the very same language in 4.0 or in the permitted activities, which then says this is expressly permitted, which is called out as an exception then, so that I don't always get to restrict it or say anything
Gotcha.
about it. And that would be ideally in terms of the grazing. There's a grazing management plan, and the grazing management plan then addresses erosion or pastures or RDMs or the types of use, including the seasonality and potential erosion impacts. So
would,
residual dry matter, it's the amount of dry matter left at the end of the season before the first rain to determine how the property is being grazed. And so it's based on slope, and there'll be different types of, it's like pounds, I think it's like a pounds per square foot, pounds per something. And so like super flat land, anything up to 400 is generally considered good. As you go up steeper slopes, you want to get up closer to 1,000 because that helps with the erosion. Bare dirt is considered a 0, and that's really bad.
I
So
didn't know that.
And I also want, I'm going to interrupt for a second because I also want to remind everybody the type of property that we're dealing with. This is agricultural land. It's been agricultural land for the last 150 years, and for the last 50 years, the Azevedo family has been on that land, and that's actually that's part of the preserve. It's agricultural open space land. Grazing is a permitted and allowed type of activity, and it actually helps the biodiversity up there. And at this point, the cattle is, I would like to tread very lightly there. We have a great working relationship with the Azevedo family, and the city is in no position of changing that
Yeah,
partnership.
that's understandable. I'm not
So I just
trying
want to make sure that
so cattle can be up there. I guess my point is, there are other things eroding the soil, including horseback riding. And in the California handbook, the trail handbook, there's a California trail handbook, it actually puts horseback riding is more erosive than bicycling. And then pedestrians are down here. It's a triangle. So I wanted to point that, I just want to put that in your head for future conversations.
I think that's.
And then, I guess my last question would be, what's your take on the contradiction between 4.7 and item I in this easement item I in the recitals, and then item 4.7, or paragraph 4.7. Because they do seem to contradict each other.
This is probably a legal frame, like a art part of it. Intent only goes so far, and at the Land Trust, we definitely work with our conservation easements to abide by the landowner's intent. But the defined terms are the conservation values and the purpose, and so much as the landowner's intent is not codified in either of those, then we have a little bit of a squishy area.
But in 4.7, they do cite erosion of the soil as the concern.
Right, but the purpose of the conservation easement is to assure that the property will be retained forever predominantly in natural, scenic, historical, agricultural, forested, and open space, not recreational. So at the end of the day, that's just a piece that we have to consider. We understand that there's an intent, and that was part of the entire transaction. Land Trust was involved with the Newells and knew that this was transferring to the city immediately after. So again, we try to work with all of the different pieces, but legally, I have certain parameters that, or I would say the Land Trust has certain parameters that they need to do. And I understand there are inconsistencies. I have 154 conservation easements. I can tell you that not one of them is perfect. Even the one I just drafted last year.
And I'm
not
speaking more to
perfect.
the practicality of it, right? I mean,
Yeah, and that's why I would say,
terms.
I think the information, a lot of these points that are being brought up are very valid for the iterative and continued conversation, in so much as the commission would choose to update the recreation portion of the management plan. Bring it, like quantitative data that's available either locally or regionally or such that can support this is what we will also be looking for. So we will be asking our partners who have done this. I will also be asking other land trusts who have worked with this, both on conservation easements and preserves. Like, this is all information that's relevant. It needs to be quantitative to be able to provide.
and that was my last question. Is the data that you're getting, is it going to be data that you're collecting? Or is it going to be data the city's providing?
It might be.
Or are we providing data?
It could be all of the above.
Okay.
I think if the land trust has concerns about the information it's receiving, then would we consider contracting a survey or some sort of assessment of our own volition? Yes, absolutely. If it helped us to determine that, that's actually under paragraph 5 for land trust approval, which means that if we need the information and we haven't received it, we can certainly contract outside and pass that cost along.
Would you charge the city for that?
That we can pass that cost along, yes.
So if we have,
Quantitative information.
if we have information to provide from you, like legitimate articles from, you know, like the California Trail Handbook or the U.S. Forest Service guidelines, that's something you guys obviously have access to it, but that's something you guys will, is that something we give to you to give to her?
Yes, so I am the liaison. I'm the city representative. The land trust deals with the city. They don't deal with members of the public. So if you need to pass information on, and again, this is going to be a bigger conversation. We're not just going to throw things at Lena or the
No,
land
it's part of the
trust.
conversation. And
Yeah,
I'm just saying,
so,
I
but-
will actually personally provide stuff to you from articles.
Correct,
I
and that will
find.
be, it'll be with the entire commission's intent to do that with the
Okay.
update of the management plan. So we'll it won't just be one individual, it'll be at this body and it will be a collective effort.
And under the terms of the easement, so on page 8, it says actually, under notice and approval, the city, as you choose to ask for the land trust's approval or acknowledgement or all those types of things, it's actually called an application, and it requires scope of work, cost, timing, impact, all of this, whereby you also look at it and provide your assessment, and then we will look at it. And it's not just me, there is a full committee at the land trust. And if there's any question, and because this is a larger relationship with the municipality, this may also bump up to our board of trustees. So it's not me in a vacuum making these decisions.
No, I
But
get that.
I would be providing, like Ally, the liaison, the conduit for all of the information to the land trust.
Okay, that's all I got.
Okay, Commissioner Mattson.
Okay, I think this is a really great conversation. I'm getting where this is all going, that we're basically codifying or memorializing what our agreements are. I actually want to ask a question off of, I think, Scott, Commissioner Ortiz and Commissioner Christian. I get the necessity of trying to do a larger biological survey, et cetera. I thought that Commissioner Christian for the Land Trust was doing some sort of annual monitoring. So I don't know how that relates to this more important, bigger evaluation. So wanted to ask that.
You're gonna.
I'll take it if you want.
I was
but-
gonna say, so we do, as part of the conservation easement program, actually I would say as part of our protected lands program, we annually visit all of our properties. Some of that work is done by volunteers, some of whom have been on the properties for longer than I've been at the Land Trust. And so in this case, Barry has been the volunteer for the Land Trust, and the way our reporting for annual monitoring reports is an objective report of what is or is not happening on the ground. They're very basic in terms of this road has major cattle traffic through it. The spring needs to be redone. Work to plant these trees has been accomplished. The bird boxes, all the different types of things, those are reported, and that's it.
Great. Thank you. I just wanted to get that connection. Question
And
for...
Alina, just to clarify, really the main purpose is to determine whether the property owner is following the terms of the easement.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Question for Ally. I noticed on the sign at Newell, the rule sign, every item had a municipal code reference. Does that mean that these general park rules, if there's new ones, we'll need to get them into the municipal code? Okay.
Not necessarily, no. I need to check in to see what the provisions of Chapter 2.04 of American Canyon Municipal Code is. And so I can get back to you on that and
Okay.
see what that municipal code is. But the weapons one, I don't foresee us changing that, neither the hunting. Fires outdoors, no. Smoking, no. Because that's in actually all of our parks. We don't allow smoking in any of our parks.
Yeah, I think they're just the trails maybe closed at any time or stay on
Yeah,
established
I
trails.
can
Those are
look
the things
into
we're
that.
adding tonight.
Yeah,
Everything else is already in the code.
yeah, I can look into
Okay,
that
just
municipal code.
curious.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then I don't know if we're ready to move on, but actually, before we move on, I think leash rather than least for the dogs. The end of the dog's a required sentence is just a typo. And then I had questions
you.
regarding maintenance. Is this a good time, or do we have more to do on the rules? So I didn't want to get us distracted if they're minor. Should I go? Okay, so I had a question, actually, not a question, but the, under the blading, city staff periodically, depending on whether and if the licensee already completed what? Required blading?
Yeah, so in the grazing license, the Azevedos, what we really wanted to address was the damage to the trails from the cattle, and I'm just gonna paint a story for you. So when we developed this grazing license, it was the intent to address a lot of the community's concerns about the upper portion of the trail and the cattle and the condition of that trail once the rains stop and the trails dry up. And so in November of last year, we did a big Ridge Trail Day. We went up there. There was a lot of work that was done on the trails in preparation of the rains. That was something we talked to Alina about. She was aware of that project. And so, again, worked with the Land Trust because we're trying to secure the trails because of the damage of the cattle. And that's where that relationship is really super important with the city. So we went up there. We did all the work on the upper portions of the trail in preparation of the rains. And then we had every intent of going back through once the rains end in May, and after we received the bird survey and we were allowed to mow and do all the normal maintenance that we typically do. But unfortunately, the rain kept coming. And it kept coming and it kept coming. So a lot of the plans that we had that we had identified that we were going to go up there once the rains were done. We were going to blade the trails, we were going to mow, we were going to do all these things on time. A lot of that didn't get done until June of this year, and the weeds at that point were out of control. In addition to that, we work with the Azevedo family. They had agreed that they would take care of any damage to the trails, and they would go through and they would blade the trails with the city's permission, and that would be in a coordination event. So they actually ended up doing that a couple weeks ago. They went up to the upper portions of the trail and they dragged the areas with the cattle. Unfortunately, because of the soil condition and the way that the trails were already dried out, it really the impact wasn't great. And so we recognize that. But we still consider that to be a win, because that was something that they had never done before for us, and that they are willing to do that. So the plan is, part of the maintenance is as outlined here. We are responsible for the vegetation management. Part of our vegetation management is mowing the lower portions of the trail. To do that, we have to do a bird survey, and it has to be within the time frame that is allowed. We have to have a negative survey to be able to move forward, and then we have only so many hours and days to do that project. When that also is being done, we plan on going through and blading the trail, because we notice that the weeds grow into the middle of the trail, and we want to make sure that we can address that as well, because we understand that there's the weeds are not very friendly to hikers and bikers. And so that is what we had implemented this past year that never came to fruition because of the weather. And unfortunately, that's reality. We couldn't get up in there. It was really muddy, it was mucky, and we would have caused more damage to the trails than actually anything.
Yeah, I think you shared that with us last time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so thank you. But my question was whether the second bullet, city staff periodically, that one, depending on whether and if should it say, and if the license already completed the required blading? It just didn't say what the licensee had completed, and I would like to see that there. Do you see what I mean?
No, I'm sorry. What second bullet?
Okay, so under maintenance, trail road maintenance, ridge trail day, and then blading.
Yep.
The second bullet under blading, city staff periodically, depending on whether and if the licensee already completed.
Yes.
What did they complete? Is it required blading? Can we just add it in there? For me, it's just not a complete sentence.
It's under blading. I can look into that. Yeah, I can.
I'm just asking for you to state what the licensee has already completed. I'm assuming it would be the required blading. So it just was unclear.
Okay, thank you.
And then under mowing, the second sub-bullet, I just am curious if they have a positive survey and they can't mow, what's the required wait time? Is it like a week later? Is it 2 weeks later? And it's probably not something we need to put in here. I was just curious.
I don't know the answer to that. They set the parameters. It really depends on what's discovered during that survey.
So the biological survey person sets it?
Yeah, the person that comes out and surveys
Okay.
it, yes. They give us a time frame of when we can resubmit.
Okay. And then my last question, when we had the grass fire through Newell and some fences had to be bulldozed down to get fire crews up there, have those fences been replaced after the fire?
Nope.
No? Okay. So I'm wondering if that should be on projects, because at this point then, if they haven't been replaced, if cows get into the lower end part of Newell, they come into town, potentially. And
Okay.
So I wanted to just bring up that one. Thank
Okay.
you.
Show up at Lake Marie.
Go knock on the doors.
Okay, Commissioner Artis.
Thanks, Lena. You answered the question that I did have about the annual surveys in as well as Barry. But I just wanted to find out, are those reports also including baseline or including annual photos that could be compared to baseline photos in case the easement had to be defended or upheld?
Sometimes,
Okay.
yes. So we have an internal procedure that we update the baseline photos of our conservation, I should say, we're trying. 154 easements is a lot, and I inherited them, many of them 30 years old already. So we are trying to have a system where our conservation easements, the photos on the baselines are updated every 10 years. I do believe we have done the update already for the Newell photos from the baseline. I actually think I did that maybe 7 to 10 years ago myself. So it does happen, and then there can be photos submitted as part of the annual report to document something that is in the report as well.
Got it. Thank you. And then on a kind of a different aspect of things, I've heard some comments earlier about potentially like limiting or staying on trails, and it's something as we kind of move down a road to actually looking and shaping more of this for public access. I mean, there may be just limitations to maybe mode of transportation or certain activity that could have to stay on the trail, because I think that certain, or maybe sensitive locations, and this is where biological survey or understanding of what the resources are out there could help inform, like certain areas would be sensitive habitat, or if there's nesting birds or whatever that needed to be avoided. But the list of like passive activities, some of those may just inherently be create a conflict or a confusion of rules versus uses, such as like wildlife observation, nature study. Some of these things are just, you can't, you're not going to do from a trail, or you're not going to necessarily have people on a trail. So people will probably stray if you're advertising, or we're saying that this is a potential use. That is just not going to happen and be limited to a trail. You're just going to invite violation of that. It's just a matter of fact. That's all.
Okay. All right, just to keep us on track here, I'm going to go through the remaining commissioners that have something to say. And I'm going to say my thing and then open up public comment, and then we'll come back to more commissioner comments. Commissioner Bensick.
Director Ikeda, would you mind repeating who has the right to make like the changes? Because I know there was some discussion about what the land trust does on their preserves. You said that the city of American Canyon owns parts of Newell?
Great question. So the city physically owns the land, so we manage and operate it, but the land has a conservation easement on that property. So before the city acquired the property, the Newell family put a conservation easement on the property with the intent to make sure that it remained open space. And they chose the Napa County Land Trust, and then the property came over to the city. That occurred in 1998, and then the management plan was drafted in 2001, and that's in conjunction with the easement. So the easement, it follows the management plan follows the conservation easement. We work with the land trust. So in 2015, many community members and city staff worked with the land trust, and they were able to obtain public access to Newell. And that was with the approval of the land trust. Any changes to the management plan needs to be within the conservation's parameters. We can go to the land trust, and I'm going to tell on myself for a minute, Lena. When I first started with the city, I had this grand idea that I wanted to do weddings up in Newell. I thought it was a beautiful location. I walked out there, I loved it.
Great.
And Lena's like, nope, not happening. So those are the kind of conversations that the city has with the land trust. We have these great ideas. We want to do different types of things up there, and then we go to the land trust and we talk about those ideas, and then we review the conservation easement. Lena schooled me so well that day. I learned a lot, but that's the purpose of them. Their main goal is to preserve the land to what is outlined in the conservation easement. Yes, the city owns and operates it, but they have the jurisdiction to tell us how we're going to manage that property.
It's a really simple kind of visual of a conservation easement is, as a property owner, unrestricted, you could do all sorts of things that are allowed by zoning. You could put a house, you could put roads, you could put a garage, you could put a tree house, whatever you want to put on there. You could plant vines, you could, put a baseball court. I don't know, baseball field. And what the conservation easement does is it says, whoa, not all of those. I'm going to take away the house, and I'm going to take away the vineyards, and I'm going to take away this other piece. But I am going to let you have a house for this purpose. And so what it does is it'll remove what we call some of the sticks out of the entire property owner's bundle, and it'll chop off other ones that might be permitted in some ways but have restrictions. And so those are all of the different types of pieces that you could say the Newell family donated those property rights to the land trust. So we hold them, not the city, not any successor owner. And this is the case on all of the conservation easements. So in essence, the land trust holds those rights, and our fiduciary responsibility, both as a conservation organization within the state of California and a 501c3, is when we take these on as the grantee of the conservation easements, we must monitor and enforce them according to California and federal code. So we have that obligation to do so. We try very hard, like Allie has been saying, to work in cooperative and collaborative ways to make things. And like I said, I have easements, much like the Newell Preserve, that are almost older than me. And I'm going, wow, what was written? That's so crazy. I would not write that because I can't monitor it, or I can't enforce it, or they're very hard. So we try very hard to have some of these things change, and so the conversation always comes up. So as things need to change for the property uses, and in this case with the public use, we would hope to keep the conversation moving. I do know that like the first management plan, this took like a year. Like it wasn't fast. It took a long time, a lot of conversation. I know my predecessor worked extensively on it as well. So changes take time.
Both those answers were very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Christian?
Okay, hopefully I'll be brief here. I think as we're diving deeper into all this, I'm getting a feeling of how much more there is that needs to be done. It's a huge responsibility. Managing an open space preserve can be very expensive. It's complex. Look at the conversations here today. This is one of the main reasons I wanted to keep the Open Space Advisory Committee going and not disband it and say, well, we got public access, we're done. We're not done. We're not even near being done. There's so much more we can do up there, and this is why I wanted to keep the Open Space Committee going in some form or fashion. And it's going to be a lot of work, but I think it'll be valuable, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to do it. And to that end, I wanted to say to Sean's point about the grazing, in the deed of conservation easement, the first page, recitals, letter B, the property possesses natural, scenic, open space, historical, agricultural, educational, and recreational values. Collectively, the conservation values. So agriculture, the grazing, is one of the things that we're protecting. We're obligated to protect it. Recreation is one of the things we're obligated. And there's 7 of these: educational, historical, open space, scenic, natural. So those 7, we have to figure out how to do it, and they're going to be in conflict, and we know that. And then finally, the grazing plan. I don't know, did you send us a grazing plan? Maybe I missed it or didn't read through it. Does it not, doesn't have the financial agreements in it, or?
Last month's packet.
What's that, last month's packet? Yeah. And that's the meeting I missed. So, okay.
I can get it too, Barry. It's the grazing license. It's not an actual grazing plan. So it's the grazing license with the Azevedos.
Okay, so I don't really need that as much. I think the actual plan for me, because if we're talking about the conflicts with bikes and cattle and all this, I think we need to know what's the plan. I think the transparency, what is the way we're going to deal with this, because we have to get all these things to get together: biking, biology, all of it. It has to all mesh and meld together and work together. So I think for transparency, we actually need to see, to the extent that there is a plan, what is the plan, and how does it work with the others? So that would be helpful to me, and that's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Hughes?
This is going to be obviously my last comment, but in regards to the mowing,
For now.
no, wait, not in regards to the mowing, in regards to the maintenance or the repairs done by the Azevedos, I think I talked to you about this, Director Aikida. They're really only responsible for above the first gate around to the bottom of the south loop?
Anywhere that their cattle is located.
Okay. Because I noticed the trail didn't get scraped from the first gate to the second gate. But that season, I actually had seen cattle standing in the mud. I mean, they ruined the trail. They ruined that section of the trail. So in the future, are they going to be blading that section of trail as well?
So they're responsible for any damage that their cattle causes to the entire property. So if a cattle gets out and breaks a fence or causes damage in the lower level, that would be a conversation between the city and the Azevedos, and that they would be responsible to fix that. But in generality, they're responsible for the area that their cattle is in. But it does outline that if there's any damage caused by cattle throughout the entire property, they're responsible for it.
Okay.
And then Barry, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. So part of the management plan actually has a piece already in it in grazing. It's section 5 of part 2. And so that's already in the plan for grazing.
Okay. I'll
Identified
take
in the
a look.
plan.
Thanks for pointing that out.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I guess the last portion of it, will the city be, in addition to what is being repaired, will the city be doing any blading or compacting, anything beyond the mowing?
So per the plan, per the maintenance plan that we have in front of you on page 146, which is page 2 of attachment 2. So what we plan on doing is blading at least twice a year. That was the plan for this past year, was to blade at least twice a year, and that was going to be within the seasons that we're allowed to blade. And work with the licensee in the upper portion as well, and maybe doing a joint partnership and relationship with that. That was the plan. That continues to be the plan. Is to go in there once the rains have stopped and take care of the mowing, take care of the blading in preparation for the spring, and then do it again later on if need to be throughout the summer season, because the weeds do grow in the middle of the trail, where that's why we were noticing that maybe doing it twice during that time would be beneficial. City staff, just want to let you know, city staff is even looking into purchasing our own ATV and our own box blader. That may not be the correct term, so please forgive me.
I think I know what you're talking about, the box scrapers.
Thank you. And we were just gonna do it ourselves, or even hire a contractor to come in and do it for us. It's been one of the biggest challenges is getting city staff to be able to go up there and do that more frequently than what we would like.
Can Sean and I drive them?
Barry, let's talk about this outside of here. No, actually, Erica was going to teach me how to do it because I want to learn, and I think that's an important skill. And we actually have an open space recreation coordinator coming on, so that would be most likely that person's job as part of the maintenance. So it's either going to be a combination of city staff or a consultant that would come in and do that.
That's awesome. I think that'll go a long way in.
Yeah,
You
we
know.
do too.
I do too.
Yeah. Yay.
Cool. That's all I got.
With the grazing license that you were talking about, you mentioned that Azevedos are responsible for, fixing the trail damage. Is there a time frame they're supposed to do that within?
There is. It's outlined in the grazing license, and I don't know it off the top of my head. So I can go back and look at that and see what that is, but it is outlined in there. And it is outlined if the city comes in and we notice something, because again, it's that partnership. We want to be able to, like, if the Azevedos, when they bladed a couple weeks ago, they actually notified me and they were like, we're going to do this for you. And I was like, I didn't even have to ask, which is great. And where we were 2 years ago from where we are now, I think that's a great accomplishment, a great win for the city. It just shows that the strength in that partnership and relationship and how comfortable they are with recognizing that this is a valuable property to many people in this community, and we need to maintain it.
And Talina, I'm curious, since some of the biological surveys, they've been ongoing, when is the last time the Tiburon paintbrush was noted on the property?
Oh, well, I used to hike out to it whenever I was on the property, but it's been a few years since I've hiked out there. I still know where it is, though.
So at least a few years ago, we have confirmed it's still there.
Mhm.
Okay.
It may have been sooner than that because I got a call about it, and it was some researchers.
Yeah.
And so I think they went out there. They wanted me to go out with them, but I think someone else, they might have got a hold of Jake, I don't know. But I think that was in the last year or so
Yeah.
that they called me, and so they may have gone out there.
Yeah.
Also red-legged frog?
I've never looked from there.
Okay. That was one of the mitigation efforts, was for the red-legged frog.
Yes. I was gonna say, we've done a really great red-legged frog project on our property over by Lake Berryessa. So I've seen what they look like now, but I've never seen them in American Canyon.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I've looked at different sites and other places, yeah. Yeah, up at the pond, I've looked on the old, the area behind the high school, up in front, above from Lavinia, the Lavinia development up in that way. So yeah, I have looked in the area, just I've never seen one in American Canyon.
You have them up on the, I think the Snell, and where the herpetology hike was with,
That was the foothill yellow-legged frog.
was it?
The foothill yellow-legged frog, up in Snell Valley. We do have them. The Land Trust has done a very large reintroduction of the California red-legged frog to a property that we own near Lake Berryessa. It's actually quite successful. We have first year and second year red-legged frogs there. It's a lot of fun. We've been tagging them and trying to find out where they go, and if they're using the little frog hotels that we've constructed on the property after
How do
the
you
fire.
tag a frog?
I do not know. I have not been able to go on a Tuesday night at like 10 p.m. to do the work. So,
You guys do a herpetology, Jeff, what's it?
Jeff Alvarez, he's
Jeff Alvarez, a recognized expert
yeah,
in red-legged frog.
and red-legged frogs, obviously, for that type of work require permitting and training and classification. So he has that. So we work solely through his license with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be able to work with the critically endangered species like that. So, but it's very cool. I just never seen him in American Canyon.
Thank you. And also, I just wanted to add, the Boulder City Council has identified e-bikes as passive recreation use for Class 1 and Class 2.
Yeah, I've seen that article.
Okay. City of Boulder,
For recreation for what?
e-bikes, they identified as passive use
But only on certain open space trails.
Oh, no, I've seen it.
on open space, yeah.
You would be unsurprised probably by the amount of information I have received about e-bikes. So,
I'd like to open for public comment.
If there's anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment,
They passed out waiting so long.
Sorry it took so long.
good. Good evening. Would you please state your name for the record?
Alan Norright,
Can you spell your last name?
Nauright.
Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. A couple of questions. It sounds like you're classifying all e-bikes in one category. You need to look into that further and define them, because there are different ones. There are some that are throttle-based. Those should not be allowed. There are ones that are pedal assist, which are no more damaging than a regular mountain bike. So you need to define those as different items, so please look into that, okay? Second one, on wetlands, you don't allow motorized vehicles. I see e-bikes throttle-based all the time, so you need to define those things correctly in the city. If you're gonna do one, do the other, okay? And then you mentioned, I agree with the closures of the trails when rain, all that, it becomes a mess. It should be closed. I totally agree with that, okay? And also, the blading, there is no way blading was done up there. I've been riding it. It's weeds this tall in the middle of the trail. Lynch has been graded, but not Newell. So if they told you they did it, they did not do it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
My name is Sucre Herrera. I'm residing in American Canyon and I'm retired, 63 years old. My frame is 350 pounds and I could point two different bikes over here, e-bike and a regular bike. A difference of maybe 5 pounds on the bikes. I understand when it rains, I give Newell 3 to 4 days for me to go ride again, because it's not called riding anymore, it's called mudding on the mud. Wetlands, I see described. There's throttle, there's motorcycles, there's all kinds of stuff, but there's something that's, you guys gotta look into it. And I have a, like I ride Moore Creek, Skyline, everywhere, and they all state, what is it, Class 1 e-bikes, which is the one I need assist like my friend, because 350 pounds. So if I go riding, I got both of the bikes. I got the regular bike and the e-bike. So that's something in which you guys need to see and describe. Differences when I go on the other side, the state lady, the park lady comes to me, is that I guess they don't know the difference on the bikes. She asked me if I was a Class 1 e-bike or not. So she believes me, but it is a Class 1 e-bike, the one I have, because it's pedal assist. That's all I got. Thank you. Lynch Canyon. I meant Lynch Canyon. In Skyline, they all have the Class 1 e-bike is allowed, and it usually states. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's all the public comment we have now, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioner comments?
Oh, Ridge Trail Day. I talked to the Ridge Trail folks today. I was at an event, that's why.
Wait, on this subject? Oh, is this on this subject?
Oh, sorry, no, just general comments.
Okay, okay.
I thought we were done.
I'm sorry.
Oh, good. We're near the end of the meeting.
Barry's done.
Okay, no other comments on this subject? Okay, all right. Moving on to management and staff reports.
Yes, I have several today. So first and foremost, I wanted to share with you, if you have not seen, over in Vets Park last week, we had some sheep out there grazing. That is part of our new vegetation management plan. We're hoping to expand that through throughout the city. It was a pilot program that deemed to be very successful, and we're hoping to be able to expand it in other locations. It was important to identify that site because this week we are going to be breaking ground for this skate park. So you're going to see the fences going up, and they're actually going to start building the skate park over in Veterans Park. So it's really exciting. I would also like to let you know that we have officially the person that we were looking to be brought on as our recreation coordinator for open space has accepted the job offer and has passed our background checks. And he is expected to start on the 16th of this month. His name is Jeffrey Freed. He comes to us from Connolly Ranch. And he has a lot of experience, not only working with open space, but also with the land trust that we currently have right now. So it's going to be a great addition to our team. And he's very familiar about conservation easements and everything else. So that's really exciting. And then November 4th is Ridge Trail Day. Again, that's going to be a day that we're going to go up and try to plan and prepare for the rainy months and preparation of the upper portion of the trail and try to secure that. And then the lower level, there's going to be some vegetation management with RCD, and we're going to be looking at the blackberry removal.
What's the date?
The 4th, November 4th.
Thistle removal too, or only blackberry?
Just blackberry at this point, yes. I have reached out to a company that we have worked with, the artichoke thistle up in Newell. I'm going to be getting a quote for that in the springtime for them to come out and address the artichoke thistle that's up in Newell during the spring. So we're in contact with that one.
So no volunteer day for the artichoke thistles, just
We were looking at a consultant to be able to do that work because it's really overgrown, and just having them come in and knock it out, because we haven't done that in quite some time, and really focus our volunteer efforts in other locations.
And then we would just keep it up after?
Yes, and try to budget for that each year so that way we know that's, again, part of the invasive species management of the property. November 18th, we have our Citizens Academy capstone project. This is where we're going to be creating a native pollinator garden down at the wetlands. It's going to be in conjunction with the outdoor education center that we have plans for there, which is the 3-season shade canopy and the permanent park restroom. This is in partnership with RCD, USDA Natural Resources, Conservation Services, as well as the U.S. Forest Service. I'm inviting all of you to come out that day if you would like to be a part of that project. It's part of the open space experience down at the wetlands, and we're hoping to start this project and hopefully grow from there. So I invite you all. I'll send you a formal invitation via email with the details.
Could you repeat the date and time? Sorry.
It is November 18th, and the project is slated from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Thank you.
At the wetlands. And then upcoming meetings. So for November 1st, which is going to be our next OSATS meeting, we are slating the Ecology Center design application will be coming to this body for review and comment. In addition, we will be holding a public meeting about the Wetlands Restoration Project, which is our Measure AA grant that we received, and we're working with ESA consultants. Today we did have a meeting with BRIT, which is a very long name that I wrote down somewhere, and I can't. It's the San Francisco Bay Area Resource. I don't know what I did with my note. But anyways, they're a company that comes out and they review these restoration projects, and they looked at the North Slough and they looked at the culvert, and we're trying to restore those areas to natural wetlands and get rid of the tide elements where the culvert is. And so they came out, they were able to survey that and look at that. And then we also discussed a potential kayak launch and what that looked like. And so they'll be providing their comments within the next month of what considerations we need to think about. And but the public meeting is going to be here on the 1st. So that'll be exciting for us to be able to bring it here to this body and talk about that project. And then for December, we are looking to holding a joint meeting with the Planning Commission. This is part of your work plan for fiscal year 23-24 to talk about the active transportation standards when it comes to the city and how that folds in with OSATs and planning.
You have a date for that?
Right now, it's looking for this meeting, which is going to be December 6th. We're trying to schedule that on the night of our normal OSATS Commission meeting night. You're welcome. And that is it for me, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Now, Commissioner comments, general comments.
Yeah, you talked about the Ridge Trail Day, and I was at a Ridge Trail event earlier tonight, and they were excited that American Canyon was going to do 2 Ridge Trail Day projects. So they like that, and I'm glad that the city is following through with that. And also, I don't know if I told you, I was talking to somebody with the city, and I misspoke and said that Chelan had renegotiated the contract. And then afterwards, I thought, wait a minute, that was Ale. That Ally that told me you renegotiated the contract with the Acevedos, and I don't know if you ever announced that or if that.
That I secured the license
Yeah,
for the grazing
and you got a
license.
much better rate, and I don't know
Yes.
if you mentioned that, but thank you. I think you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. It's a good conversation. Let me just confirm.
Well, it's only once a month.
It's time to adjourn the meeting, 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Chair. Good work.